The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Eric Pulier, the entrepreneur, technologist, author, and public speaker. You are the founder of Vatom, an innovative Web3 SaaS engagement platform that enables companies to connect better to their customers, employees, and stakeholders while streamlining processes and improving profitability. Vatom has become the Web3 infrastructure and engagement platform of choice for some of the largest companies in the world, including Google, PepsiCo, Deloitte, Verizon, iHeartMedia, State Farm, WPP, and soon, London Real. You personally have founded 16 companies and raised over $1 billion in capital with a variety of exits via mergers, acquisitions, IPOs, and ICOs. You ultimately believe that traditional engagement is dead, traditional work is dead, and that Web3 platforms like Vatom will enable both companies and individuals to more positively engage with one another with more personalized experiences. Eric, welcome to London Real.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. I just want to start by saying that Vatom is one of our portfolio companies here at London Real Ventures. We are the world's first media-powered investment firm. Our mission is to transform the world by investing in cutting-edge Web3 and AI companies while giving our partners marketing exposure across the London Real media platforms and academies. We strive to heighten awareness, create customers, and build communities by leveraging our global audience and extensive network. Eric, super excited to be part of your journey with Vatom. And look, I still remember that Zoom call with you and your team a few months ago. And when you started dropping the demos of your products that you created for Google and PepsiCo and Starbucks, and don't worry, we're gonna show a few of those later. Like, everybody's on the call, our collective jaws just dropped. Like, we were just massively impressed with what you built. And look, I've been deep here in Web3 for the past 2 years, and I've spent time speaking with some of the biggest names in blockchain and the biggest names in Metaverse, including people like Sebastian from the Sandbox and Yatsu of Animoca Brands. But I had never seen anything like what you guys had created. I think you built what everybody has been wanting and what everyone's been waiting for. And I've actually now started playing myself with it to build London Real's Web3 experience. Yeah, and I'm even more impressed with everything you can do in there. So that's a pretty intense start. But for people that don't know, how do you explain, what is Vatom? How do you explain that to them?
Well, Vatom, first of all, what it stands for is the word virtual atom, together meaning Vatom. And that's important. It doesn't just roll off the tongue, it actually has meaning behind it, which is the idea that we're dissolving the boundaries between the physical and digital worlds and not taking us away from this world, the world we live in that we were evolved to be in, but to enhance it, to extend our opportunity in this world to connect better with each other. And so what Vatom does is it allows us to connect better with each other. Brands to their audiences, sports teams to their fans, and us to one another. So that's why we call it an engagement platform. That's the best way to describe Vatom. It's an engagement platform that anyone can use. Yes, it's enterprise class. I think it might be the only really enterprise class, meaning secure, scalable, ready to integrate with existing Web 2 systems or Web 1 or pre-web, making it part of the communications infrastructure. But it extends that out for a new way of communication.
Wow. And I remember when you broke it down, you said, look, there's a lot of platforms out there in the Web3 space that do one thing. They do wallets, or maybe they have a metaverse, or maybe they have an NFT, or maybe they have an NFT marketplace. Yeah. But I still remember the slide where you're like, there's kind of 7 pillars, and you wanted to build something that had them all, because this piecemeal way I think you always saw that that was never going to work to really provide the experience that you want to provide to users.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's not that hard to understand why. I mean, imagine you went to an auto dealership and you wanted a car, and they said, here's the most unbelievable steering wheel. And some people actually do this, and they're quite good at it. Here's a wheel. Here's a carburetor. And I actually know people who have the ability to stitch these things together and make an unbelievable car. But maybe 2 people. Most people want something that works together seamlessly and can get you where you need to go and has been tested for that purpose. That's the same thing that's needed here. It's fine to have a marketplace, but does it work with your wallet? It's fine to have a wallet. Can everyone use it? It's fine to have a wallet that everyone can use, but does it seamlessly integrate with a virtual space and with augmented reality? And does that work back with a back-end analytic platform? By the time you're done, you have a car. That's what's needed to make this go mainstream.
We all heard about this metaverse. Like my mom, she's in San Diego and she's in her 70s, and I try to explain to her what the metaverse is, and she's like, what is it? Do I have to wear the goggles?
Right.
And I think the public, I don't know if they even understand what a metaverse is.
Right.
How do you explain it to them? Is it about putting goggles on and hanging out, with Zuckerberg in a virtual room? Or is the definition has it been miscommunicated to the public?
I think it has, for a couple of reasons. One is the breathless hype always leads to kind of this trap of disillusionment. But the other reason is, what do we really want, right? If we're going to get all excited about something, let's put a vision out there that if it were to come true, we'd be happy about it. No, we don't want to go into some far off place and be stuck in a video game playing ping pong with Mark. What we want is to extend our experience to talk to each other better. It's really interesting. If we had a phone here, I'd call up your mom and say, look, let's talk about this, because if you already understand a telephone, when a telephone came out, people were freaked out. You're never going to see your mom again. Why would you go see your mom if you could call her on the phone? It was going to destroy society. Truth is, telephone actually was really useful. It helped us connect with each other better, and I think there's a lot of negatives that have come of the evolution of the telephone to become a smartphone that actually gives us information about people instead of connecting us better, creates disillusionment, creates loneliness and disconnection. But the telephone itself, the idea of a communication over long distances is strong, right? As things have evolved to the web, when you think about the immense power that's brought to our lives, of course, any tool can be used for negative. So many positive things have happened in healthcare, education, government about the web. But it was really about information, right? And then you go better information, and then you can create self-generated information, user-generated content. But still about information. Really didn't bring us it wasn't the next step of communication the way the telephone was, right? The metaverse is. The metaverse brings the fancy telephone, the idea, to the web itself. So imagine a website. If your mom was here, I'd say, imagine a website you can visit your son at. It's that simple, right? A website that you can go to. A website that you can connect other humans in, not just on where information comes out, but in an immersive environment where we've learned to take social cues from each other and from the environment to create memories, experiences. That's going to change education. What is education? It's something that you want to get deeper into that you can remember later and then apply, right? What is communication? It's a way to take all the different social cues and actually impart information from one another to create relationships. This is a very powerful tool that will now advance that. But on the simplest level, it's a better website.
Right. And it's a way to interact in a social way that we love to do in person, in a world that we've just now assumed is Web 2, and it's something we don't get to hang out with our friends on.
No.
So even imagining is probably hard for someone like my mom or people that have been
It's
in Web 2.
hard to imagine, but once you see it for 1 to 2 seconds, it's hard to unsee it.
Right.
So it's not hard to imagine anymore once you go to a website and instead of looking at information, you hear someone out of your left ear. Oh, so you look over there. Oh, there's somebody I can talk to, and then you move over there. You're not trapped in a box like Zoom, where you get Zoom fatigue and a kind of fight or flight reason to get anxiety in your body and you're stuck, imagine Zoom with agency. Imagine a website with people, places, and things, the same primitives that allow us to understand this world as being real. Some of us still subscribe to the belief that this is the real world. I happen to be one of them. I'm trying to stay in it the best we can. But to be present in this world and to connect to other people, we can now translate some of those elements into the virtual space and more fully integrate our digital and physical lives.
Right. And that doesn't necessarily have to include a VR component to it.
No.
Which a lot of people don't understand that, right?
That's a very important thing to understand. It would be nice to fast forward X years to get devices that are incredibly lightweight, that are not feeling like they're going to separate us from other people in the room, that we can wear for long periods of time, that have infinite battery life. Like, that's a future that will come, but even when it comes, I don't think it's going to be as powerful as not having something on your head, as having this, God-given form that can then interact with digital information and connect to each other. So when you have a persistent virtual space where you can communicate in, the best way that we've come to the conclusion to bring it to the world is to create this analogy of the real world, persistent, always on. If you put something down there, the next time you come, it'll still be there. The cues that make you understand and believe that it's as real as anything else. Blockchain being another interesting aspect of the psychology, not only of ownership, but of independent permanence, right? So the idea that something will stay even if a certain company or game, et cetera, dies, gives you that notion, that feeling that it's real. Mm-hmm. So now imagine a virtual space that exists independent of us. Now imagine that you want to go into it to connect to somebody. It doesn't matter if you choose to wear goggles. That's okay. Nothing against you for that. I mean, I think there's actually immense benefit for some of that immersion for certain use cases. But what if you're in the car and you just want to tap in and talk to somebody? Well, you should be able to say, go in, goes to somebody there. Now maybe within this environment, my avatar shows up because we're in a different device and we see you that way. But if I'm in the car, I just want audio. And if I want to text, I can maybe just text. And if I want to come in on a laptop, I'll come in on a laptop. So device independence is the key to the evolution of virtual spaces to become as real as physical ones.
And I think the big thing that I learned about the metaverse is all of us are in metaverses. A WhatsApp group is a metaverse. A Zoom call is a metaverse.
Exactly.
Whenever we're digitally connecting with each other, maybe a phone call was the original low-tech version of it, like you said. And so when people get that realization, you're like, okay, but it feels very simple in 2D. And you're like, well, what about if that was just better?
Yeah. What if it was better from the perspective of enhancing our humanity instead of pulling us apart, instead of disconnecting us? Right. What if we could take the next generation of technology and instead of keep rolling down the path where it's destroying the very essence of what we are, people who want to connect, and at least starts to turn back towards what will give us purpose, allow us to build better relationships, give us the tools necessary to live better lives. I think we have that opportunity now.
Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room. What went wrong with Web 2? There's a lot of things that Web 2 did. You're already talking about how it disassociates us, probably because it's optimizing for revenue models to make a few companies massive. There's obviously there's a lot of times zero direct information relationships. Then there's all these other issues that kind of come up. Digital colonialism. Yatsu is always talking about that, about we gave away our data and they sold it back to us. Yeah. I've had my own struggles with censorship and not being able to communicate with people that really want to hear what I have to say. Sure. But since we have to go to this Web 2 platform, nobody's happy.
Yeah.
Maybe you can just talk about what did Web 2 do right and how do you explain to people why it's time for Web 3? Because I think a lot of the brands you are doing business with maybe initially don't know why.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really important when we look at our evolution to Web3, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yes, let's identify the things that went wrong. And I'll say a few things about that. But let's first celebrate the things that went right. Let's step back and marvel for a minute at the shoulders of the giants we now stand on and thank them for the work that now allows us to advance things. Like one of my favorite people, Peter Diamandis, who's on our board, an investor of ours and my very good friend, is probably one of the more optimistic leaders in the world in terms of how you can look at technology as a tool for the benefit of humanity, for where we're going. And I'm reminded in this conversation that we should first say, what an extraordinary thing that we've created this low-cost, ubiquitous network that at some point everybody could very well have access to, and it's moving in that direction, that will affect how we educate people and how healthcare is done, and longevity on the back of it is growing like mad. And there's a lot of negative news, but if you actually look at the stats, a lot of these technologies have come together to create much more positive than negative, right? That said, it's time to evolve to something better, as always, right? Always you want to look at what's next and adjust. So one of the issues that we found with this evolution of the internet and finding that concentration of power in certain areas is that it can very well restrict the most important thing, I believe, is just free speech, right? The promise of the internet is that everyone's connected and can realize their potential as a creative being. But if you concentrate the power, then the expression gets halted there, right? And that's one of the issues. And we can talk a little bit about how Web3 has the promise to address that, free speech being one. The other one that I think is really important is when you think about how people make money, earn a living on the internet, also gets concentrated a certain way, the gatekeepers, et cetera. The next thing is your personal data. Who owns it? Who gets to use it? How do they get to use it? How was that used in the past, once people recognized how important that could be? To what end, right? So there was some very negative things that came out of that once people recognized it. I remember back in the early stages of social media, your listeners who have been around the bend a few times will remember Friendster, pre-MySpace, one of the first social networks, right? And I remember some of the brilliant people that were really looking at this and understanding the potential of that. And some of the brainstorming that went on back then of like, wow, if you could really start to glean the likes of people from how they're expressing themselves with one another, you could, and then says, you could what? You could make their lives better? No, even then it was like, you could give better information to advertisers, right? You could sell it. So right at the beginning it was always like, but it was very hard to know how to do that. Then the innovative guys at MySpace, you know, Chris Wolf and Abra Whitcomb, they dove in and they made it available at a mass scale for people to start to express themselves. But it got pretty messy, expressing yourselves all over the time. And they weren't really data mining so much as really around the creative side of expression. Then Mark Zuckerberg came along. Absolutely brilliant. Give him credit, organized it in a different way, understood the power of virality and the social network, and really created, I think, an industry, but it ran amok. There were no guidelines, at least none that were followed for purposes other than profit. And so now you can start to see the realization of that vision and the pros and cons of that. A lot of pros, by the way. Again, a lot of people who leverage these tools for positive purposes and still do. That said, now we step back. Okay, so what happens if we can move to a different model where it's more decentralized, where there's more power put on the edges meaning the humans using the devices, as opposed to the central authorities, with still, you don't want a full decentralization. I'm not one of these people who is again, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We actually still want guidelines. We want communities who are able to manage centrally their norms. You don't want to have to take in neo-Nazis and people who have, horrific beliefs into your community. Let them do what they want to do in theirs. So being able to control things centrally still matters, but not as the essence of the network itself, right? You have to be able to choose how you want. So let's start at the very basic to answer your question of like, what's different now? What's the opportunity? The basic, most important underlying piece of the next generation puzzle is identity. And that's where we started. A lot of people look at our journey and look at how we started the first use of digital objects on blockchains, the first NFTs for engagement. And it looks like from there, we then started to build on that premise. But actually, we started around a different notion, which is, what if we could all own our own data? What if we could all be ourselves? Again, if we go back to our earlier statement where this world is made up of people, places, and things, as you go to the internet, there's none of that. You're not a person, you're a account register individual in that particular company's database. And then you go to another one and now you're that, and now you're that. You're not you showing up, right? So there's no people there. There's no places as opposed to, hey, let's go meet at cars.com. And there's no things, there's no true ownership. So as you go to people, places, and things, you start to add that as a way to now advance the next generation of the internet. Let's start with people. Well, I want to be a person when I show up. And when I go to the next, I want to still be me. And what I took from there, I want to have. That's me, it's my inventory, and it's my persona that I want to express. The way that I express myself is my choice. So you're allowed to have my birthday. And my dentist might be allowed to have certain aspects of my medical records so that I don't have contraindications. They didn't kill me with laughing gas. And this guy may be able to have something else. But that's my choice, right? And so when I start this journey and I look at where we go, I really believe that that's the underpinning of people owning their own identity, their own data. So what does that look like in Web3? It looks like what's kind of become known as the Web3 wallet. That is the base layer. A lot of us, and I'm one of them, believe that everyone will have one. You'll have, today, maybe people have 75 apps and they use 4. It's very hard to find what you want if you want different types of things, and you end up trying something new and maybe incorporating it, but you don't have one place to keep the essential elements that are you, that you go from place to place. So I think that's the first piece. What that does is it allows you to show up in a certain way, ultimately not only monetize your data, but get paid yourself, right? For not only for your data, but for your work output, for your creativity. So that's the base. The next thing for Web3 is that when you move to a more decentralized kind of system, and somebody doesn't like your freedom of speech, how you're expressing it, what can they do? It's really hard to shut down the internet. Now, some countries have become pretty good at it. And there's reasons. If you ever look at a country that gets this kind of dictatorial type leadership, the first thing they do is shut down freedom.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.